Empty fuel gauges told the story of December 1944. German tanks sat motionless in Belgian snow. Perfect machines reduced to steel monuments by petroleum poverty. The mathematics were brutal, simple, decisive. America possessed what Germany desperately needed. Fuel flowed through Allied pipelines like blood through arteries. German forces scraped for every drop, while their enemies swam in oceans of gasoline. Near Stavelot, Belgium, on December 17, 1944, the crisis reached its peak. Kampfgruppe Piper, commanded by Obersturmführer Joachim Peiper, had advanced further than any German unit. His Tiger II tanks represented the finest armor ever built. Impenetrable steel, devastating guns, veteran crews. But the fuel gauges read empty. Through his commander's periscope, Peiper watched American supply convoys streaming past. Each truck burned more fuel in 1 hour than his entire column possessed for combat. The irony cut deep. His 860-liter tank had consumed its final drops just 3 kilometers from salvation. A massive American fuel depot containing 2.2 million gallons sat tantalizingly close. Peiper could smell the gasoline in the air. Victory lay beyond his reach, measured not in miles, but in gallons. At his post-war testimony during the Dachau trials, Peiper recalled the moment with bitter precision. We could smell the gasoline. The greatest fuel depot in Belgium lay just beyond our reach. My vehicles sat like monuments to our failure. American abundance mocked German scarcity. Through binoculars, Peiper observed Belgian civilians and American engineers preparing to destroy what couldn't be evacuated. By his calculations, the visible fuel alone could operate his entire Kampfgruppe for 6 months. The Americans had accumulated more petroleum at this single location than the entire 6th SS Panzer Army possessed for the Ardennes offensive. Perfect machines rendered useless by empty tanks. The Americans would burn over 1 million gallons rather than let Germans capture it. This casual destruction of fuel revealed the vast gulf between American abundance and German desperation. The crisis strangling German forces in the Ardennes had roots reaching back to fundamental resource inequality. Wehrmacht records preserved in the Bundesarchiv Military Archive document the stark mathematics. Germany produced 5.7 million tons of oil annually in 1941, including synthetic production from coal. The United States alone produced 180 million tons, with access to another 300 million tons from Allied sources. 100-to-1 disadvantage that no amount of tactical brilliance could overcome. For the Ardennes offensive, Hitler had promised Field Marshal von Rundstedt 5 million gallons of fuel. The Wehrmacht managed to stockpile approximately that amount, but transportation bottlenecks meant only 3.117 million gallons were actually available when the offensive began December 16th. Even this allocation, larger than initially planned, provided fuel for only 6 days of operations. German General Staff calculations showed they possessed enough petroleum for 1/3 to 1/2 the distance to Antwerp under combat conditions. Major Joachim Dietrich, quartermaster of the 2nd Panzer Division, recorded the impossible arithmetic in his war diary. Fuel per vehicle enough for 90 to 100 miles. Distance to Antwerp, 125 miles minimum. Fuel required for combat maneuvering double the standard rate. We are ordered to capture American supplies to continue. The entire operation depends on stealing enemy fuel. While German tanks would soon sit immobilized, awaiting petroleum, American forces had created the most extraordinary logistics operation in military history. The Red Ball Express, operating from August 25 to November 16, 1944, delivered 2,500 tons of supplies daily at its peak. A dedicated highway system stretched from Normandy beaches to front lines. First Lieutenant Charles Waco, of the 36th and 32nd Quartermaster Truck Company, an African-American unit forming the operation's backbone, documented the scale. My company alone moved 5,000 gallons in a good day. We burned 3,000 gallons daily, just operating our trucks. More fuel consumed delivering fuel than the Germans had for combat. Yesterday, a driver spilled 50 gallons missing a tank opening. The lieutenant said, "That's why we bring extra." Nobody counted gallons. We counted tanker ships. Transportation Corps records revealed the scope. 6,000 trucks operated continuously on exclusive military highways. In 82 days, they delivered 41,193 tons of supplies to advancing armies. While fuel wasn't the only cargo, petroleum products constituted the largest single category. This enabled Patton's Third Army and Hodges's First Army to consume their combined 800,000 gallons daily during the pursuit across France. Unknown to Germans plotting their December offensive, the Allies had accomplished an engineering miracle that made fuel scarcity obsolete. Operation Pluto Pipeline under the ocean had laid flexible pipelines across the English Channel. After initial difficulties by December 1944, the system approached its capacity of 1 million gallons daily. Captain Bernard Williams, a petroleum engineer from Standard Oil supervising Pluto operations, recorded his observations. "We're pumping 3,000 tons of fuel daily through underwater pipes. The Germans are calculating fuel by the barrel, while we measure by the tanker load. This single pipeline delivers more daily than Germany's entire synthetic fuel industry produces." The pipeline network extended across liberated Europe. By December 1944, Americans had constructed 3,000 miles of fuel pipelines across France and Belgium. A petroleum circulatory system delivered fuel like blood through arteries. Every major depot connected to this network could receive unlimited supplies regardless of weather or enemy action. The fuel depot complex between Spa and Stavolo represented American logistics doctrine at its most abundant. Depot number 2 near Spa contained 26,000 gallons. Depot number 3 at Stavolo held 15,000 gallons. Together, over 3.3 million gallons. More than Germans had allocated for their entire offensive sat in this one sector. Staff Sergeant James Morrison of the 225th Quartermaster Battalion described the Stavolo Depot. Mountains of jerry cans stacked like pyramids, underground storage tanks, fuel trucks parked in endless rows. Yesterday, HQ sent another 2,000 gallons. I asked where we'd put it. Captain said stack it higher. We had so much that when Piper got close, we just burned what we couldn't move. 4,000 gallons up in smoke, like it was nothing. The depot's records revealed American fuel wealth. Daily receipts averaged 2,000 gallons. Daily distribution, 18,000 gallons. This created ever-growing reserves. By December 17th, when Piper's Spearhead approached, these depots contained enough fuel to operate every vehicle in the German Wehrmacht for 4 months. German tanks advancing through the Ardennes represented superb engineering shackled by catastrophic consumption rates. The Tiger II's Maybach engine delivered 700 horsepower, but drank 2.75 gallons per mile on roads. Cross-country movement demanded 5.5 gallons per mile. A Tiger II's 860-liter capacity meant a combat radius of perhaps 60 miles before requiring refueling. Feldwebel Hans Zimmermann, driver of Tiger II, number 332, documented the crisis. Started December 16th with full tanks. By noon, down to half after 35 kilometers. American fighter bombers forced us off-road. Cross-country movement doubled consumption. By nightfall, nearly empty. Ordered to continue advancing. With what fuel? Panther tanks, theoretically more efficient, achieved barely half a mile per gallon in combat. A Panther battalion's 60 tanks required 15,000 gallons to move 30 miles under fire. Kampfgruppe Pipers' entire fuel allocation, 18,000 gallons, meant enough for one major engagement. Nothing remained for exploitation. Piper himself testified at Dachau, "We were told to drive until the tanks stopped, then capture American fuel. This wasn't a military operation, but organized banditry. We weren't soldiers, but fuel thieves. We failed even at that." The most significant German fuel capture occurred at Bullingen, December 17th. A Kampfgruppe Piper detachment discovered an American fuel dump containing 5,000 gallons. Only a handful of rear echelon troops guarded it. They fled when German tanks appeared. Unterscharführer Georg Fleps recalled the discovery. "We couldn't believe it. Jerry cans stacked everywhere. Fuel trucks with keys in the ignition. We filled every tank, every container. It was like finding water in the desert. But even this windfall, 5,000 gallons, would barely get us to the Meuse." The captured fuel revealed another dimension of American superiority. Every can bore octane ratings: 80, 85, 100 octane. Americans had different grades for different purposes. High octane for aircraft, middle grades for trucks. Specialized fuels for various engines. Germans, when they had fuel at all, made do with synthetic gasoline of such poor quality it damaged engines and reduced performance by 20%. At Bullingen, Piper's men also captured 50 American prisoners. In a war crime that would feature prominently at his trial, these prisoners were forced to fuel German vehicles before being executed. A grim testament to German desperation for petroleum. December 18th at Trois Ponts, Piper's advance met disaster. Not from enemy fire, but from demolished bridges. Major Robert Yates engineers of the 51st Engineer Combat Battalion blew the Amblev Bridge at 11:45 a.m. The Somme Bridge fell at 1 p.m., just as German vehicles approached. These demolitions forced Piper north toward La Glaise, away from the massive fuel depots he desperately needed to capture. Captain John Wilson of the 291st Engineers recalled the moment. "We could see their lead tanks approaching. Tigers and Panthers. Magnificent machines. But we knew they were running on fumes. Every bridge we dropped forced them to burn fuel, finding alternate routes. We were defeating them with TNT and time, making them waste what they couldn't spare." The bridge demolitions at Trois Ponts proved decisive. Piper's detour consumed precious fuel. By the time his forces reached La Glaise, most vehicles were running on their last reserves. They had traveled less than 50 miles from their start line. December 19th, Piper's spearhead reached La Glaise. Tantalizingly close to the 2.2 million-gallon depot near Spa, but his vehicles were dying of thirst. American forces had successfully evacuated most of the depot's fuel. What remained would be destroyed rather than captured. Piper radioed desperately for fuel. The Luftwaffe attempted aerial resupply December 22nd. Of 35 Ju-52 transport planes dispatched, only 10 reached the drop zone. They delivered 1,100 gallons, enough for perhaps 10 tanks to move 10 miles. Most containers burst on impact or fell into American hands. Christmas Eve, December 24th. Piper faced reality, starting with 4,800 men and 800 vehicles, including 117 tanks. He now commanded immobilized steel monuments to German fuel poverty. He would abandon 135 vehicles at La Glaise, 6 Tiger IIs, 13 Panthers, 6 Panzer IVs, 50 other armored vehicles, almost all mechanically perfect, but without fuel. "I had the finest tank crews in the Wehrmacht," Piper testified, "commanding the most powerful tanks ever built. We abandoned them not from enemy action, but from empty fuel gauges. We walked out on foot like beggars, while Americans drove past in endless columns. The Malmedy Crossroads. December 17th witnessed Kampfgruppe Piper commit the war's most notorious massacre on the Western Front. 84 American prisoners from the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion were murdered. While the massacre's primary motive was maintaining operational tempo, the broader context of fuel desperation permeated German actions throughout the offensive. Technical Sergeant William Merrican, who survived by playing dead, testified. They were in a hurry, checking their watches constantly. I heard officers arguing about fuel consumption, about making speed. They killed us because we would slow them down, and they couldn't afford delay. The irony was bitter. Germans murdered prisoners to save time, yet still ran out of fuel before reaching their objectives. The Malmedy massacre would become symbolic of German barbarity, also of their desperation. As German tanks sat immobilized, American forces demonstrated casual fuel abundance that demoralized enemy observers. Sherman tanks kept engines running continuously in freezing weather, burning fuel for crew comfort. Jeeps drove 2 blocks rather than walking. Generators powered electric lights, movie projectors, and coffee makers throughout the night. Private First Class Anthony Caruso of the 391st Quartermaster Gas Supply Company described routine waste. We drained old fuel from tanks after 3 days and replaced it with fresh. German POWs watching us dump hundreds of gallons nearly rioted. One sergeant begged to collect discarded fuel in his canteen. When we laughed, he said we were laughing at Germany's grave. Captain Robert Johnson of the 14th Cavalry Group reported his observations. My squadron burned more fuel staying warm last night than a German panzer company possesses for combat. We measure fuel by the depot. They measure by the jerry can. This isn't warfare between equals. It's industrial abundance, crushing industrial poverty. By late December, American engineers had extended fuel pipelines to within 30 miles of front lines. The advancing pipeline represented American doctrine: permanent infrastructure following combat forces, ensuring unlimited fuel supply regardless of tactical situation. Captain Eugene Smith, 697th Engineer, Petroleum Distribution Company, described the work. We laid pipe across the Ardennes battlefield while German bodies were still warm. By January 1st, we were pumping 100,000 gallons daily to locations the Germans had abandoned for lack of fuel. Every mile of pipe we laid was another nail in their coffin. The pipeline from Cherbourg to the German border could deliver 4 million gallons daily without using a single truck. This infrastructure made American forces effectively immune to fuel constraints that paralyzed German operations. The relief of Bastogne demonstrated American fuel supremacy at its most dramatic. Patton's Third Army pivoted 90 degrees, moving 3 divisions over 100 miles in freezing conditions to strike the German flank. This maneuver consumed 800,000 gallons in 72 hours, nearly the entire German fuel allocation for the offensive. Colonel Walter Muller, Patton's logistics officer, recorded the exchange. Patton asked if we had enough gas. I showed him the numbers: 2 million gallons in reserve, another million arriving daily. He said stop counting and start driving. We burned more fuel reaching Bastogne than the Germans had to reach Antwerp. Meanwhile, German forces attempting to capture Bastogne were already rationing fuel. The 2nd Panzer Division closest to the Meuse River had traveled 60 miles on fuel meant for 30. They sat immobilized within sight of their objective, begging for fuel that didn't exist. The surrounded 101st Airborne at Bastogne provided another demonstration of American logistics supremacy. Despite complete encirclement, they never lacked fuel for vehicles' generators or heating. C-47 transports flew in supplies, including 5,000 gallons of fuel in specially designed crash-resistant containers. Sergeant Joseph Borelli of the 326th Engineer Battalion described the drops. Germans watched from the woods as parachutes delivered jerry cans. German prisoners helped collect containers, shaking their heads in disbelief. One said, "You fly gasoline? You have so much you fly it?" He wasn't angry, just broken. The Luftwaffe, struggling to fuel its remaining aircraft, watched American planes burn thousands of gallons to deliver thousands more. A circular logic of abundance that shattered German morale more effectively than artillery. Christmas Day, 1944, marked the complete collapse of German fuel logistics. Across the Ardennes, German vehicles sat abandoned. Not destroyed, but simply empty. The 2nd Panzer Division at Celles, having advanced furthest west, was annihilated when it ran out of fuel just 3 miles from the Meuse. Major Hans von Luck, attempting to withdraw the 116th Panzer Division, described the catastrophe. American vehicles lined up at field fuel points like peacetime filling stations. Soldiers with hoses filled tanks as casually as pre-war attendants. My own Panthers sat empty 500 meters away. We destroyed them and walked into captivity. At Ch.F. headquarters, Eisenhower's logistics staff reported fuel stocks, 42 million gallons in theater, 1.5 million gallons arriving daily. The German offensive had increased American fuel consumption from 800,000 to 1.2 million gallons daily. Treated as a minor fluctuation, they still maintained 35 days of reserves. The most powerful symbol of German defeat was King Tiger 332, abandoned near La Glaise with an empty fuel tank but otherwise perfect condition. This 68-ton masterpiece of engineering, virtually impervious to Allied guns, was defeated by an empty fuel gauge. The tank's commander, Oberscharführer Kurt Knispel, Germany's highest-scoring tank ace with 168 confirmed kills, wrote his final combat report. "Destroying my vehicle for lack of fuel. Engine perfect. Gun operational. Armor intact. But the fuel tank is empty. We are defeated by absence. The absence of gasoline, which the Americans possess in infinite quantity." American forces found the destroyed King Tiger the next day. Beside it lay a carefully coiled siphon hose, the final tool of an army reduced to stealing drops, while its enemies swam in oceans of petroleum. Captured German officers provided devastating insights into fuel poverty. Major Heinrich Gerstel, quartermaster of 2nd SS Panzer Division, captured December 26th, revealed the impossible mathematics. "Your smallest depot contains more fuel than my entire division received. You measure in tanker ships what we measure in barrels. This isn't war. It's industrial annihilation." When shown American supply records 100,000 gallons daily for an armored division, Gerstel refused to believe it until presented with actual receipts. His response then, why continue fighting? You've already won. We are dead men walking in empty tanks. Oberst Friedrich von Mellenthin, operations officer for Army Group B, compiled the final arithmetic. Fuel required for Antwerp, 4.5 million gallons. Fuel available, 3.17 million gallons. Fuel delivered to units, 2.1 million gallons. Fuel consumed by December 24th, 2 million gallons. Fuel captured, 2,000 gallons. Result: complete immobilization. The fuel crisis, strangling German ground forces, connected directly to the American strategic bombing campaign. By December 1944, American bombers had reduced German synthetic fuel production by 90%. The Leuna plant, once producing 2,000 tons daily, operated at 10% capacity. December 24th, as German tanks scraped their last drops. 2034 American bombers attacked German rail yards and fuel facilities. This single mission consumed 5.5 million gallons of aviation fuel, nearly double Germany's entire allocation for the Ardennes. Lieutenant General Karl Spaatz calculated the exchange. We burn 5 million gallons to destroy their capacity to produce 5,000 gallons. The arithmetic is extravagant but decisive. We trade abundance for their scarcity. American combat engineers demonstrated another dimension of fuel superiority. The 291st Engineer Combat Battalion defending Malmedy used bulldozers, cranes, and compressors, consuming 5,000 gallons daily just maintaining roadblocks. Their D7 bulldozers burned 50 gallons per hour operating continuously. German pioneers observing through binoculars reported the impossible profligacy. Hauptmann Werner Kampfer, 12th SS Pioneer Battalion, wrote his observations. Americans use machines for everything. Gasoline-powered saws, pneumatic drills, mechanized bridge layers. Tasks requiring our manual labor for days, they accomplish in hours, with machines burning unlimited fuel. The Ardennes offensive revealed fuel as the controlling factor in modern warfare. Germany had assembled 25,000 men, 1,400 tanks and assault guns, and 2,600 artillery pieces. A formidable force rendered impotent by petroleum poverty. Field Marshal Walter Model's final assessment was blunt. We cannot withdraw mechanized forces. We lack fuel to save what we lack fuel to operate. Americans advance not through superior tactics, but through gasoline. They win because they have petroleum. We lose because we don't. The numbers told everything. American fuel available in theater, 180 million gallons. German fuel for offensive, 3.17 million gallons. Daily American delivery capacity, 4 million gallons. Daily German production, 4,000 gallons. Ratio, 100:1. Behind the battlefield lay industrial reality. American refineries produced 5 million barrels daily. The Texas-Louisiana refinery complex alone outproduced the entire Axis. The Baytown refinery processed 10 million gallons daily. More than Germany's entire synthetic fuel industry. German synthetic fuel plants, engineering marvels, producing gasoline from coal, represented desperate improvisation against geological reality. Despite inventing the process, Germany never exceeded 12,000 tons monthly. American natural petroleum production reached 15 million tons monthly. Dr. Heinrich Butefisch, former IG Farben synthetic fuel director, admitted post-war. We spent billions of Reichsmarks creating what Americans pumped from the ground. They burned excess fuel in flares while we measured by the drop. This wasn't technological competition, but resource infinity versus scarcity. January 28, 1945, the Ardennes offensive had completely collapsed. German forces abandoned 15,000 vehicles during retreat, most from fuel exhaustion rather than combat damage. The Wehrmacht lost 600 tanks and assault guns, approximately 400 from empty fuel tanks. American forces, conversely, had consumed 50 million gallons during the battle, more fuel than Germany possessed nationally. They ended the battle with larger reserves than when it began, testament to their logistics pipeline delivering 1.5 million gallons daily throughout the fighting. The 406th 3rd Ordnance Evacuation Company recovered German vehicles after the battle. Their inventory revealed the pattern. Tiger IIs abandoned with full ammunition. Panthers destroyed by their crews for want of 100 gallons. Assault guns pushed into ditches when fuel ran out. Each vehicle a monument to petroleum poverty. The Battle of the Bulge proved that modern warfare was won in oil fields and refineries, not just battlefields. Germany brought tactical brilliance, superior tanks, and veteran crews to the Ardennes. America brought gasoline. Unlimited, abundant, overwhelming gasoline. General Eisenhower understood this reality perfectly. The Germans had excellent soldiers, superior tanks in many cases, defensive advantages, but they measured fuel by the barrel while we measured by the tanker ship. This disparity made victory inevitable. The German offensive, Hitler's last gamble, was doomed before the first shot. The Wehrmacht needed to capture American fuel to continue, but American fuel abundance meant even massive captures wouldn't matter. Losing 3 million gallons at Spa-Stavolo was an inconvenience for Americans. For Germans, failing to capture it meant defeat. The Ardennes battle marked warfare's transformation from martial contest to industrial competition. Victory belonged not to the bravest soldiers or best tactics, but to whoever could deliver the most fuel to the battlefield. American doctrine embraced this reality. Overwhelming logistics supporting continuous operations. German doctrine, rooted in operational excellence, couldn't overcome resource scarcity. The finest tank crews commanding the most powerful tanks ever built were defeated by empty fuel gauges. Colonel Crichton Abrams, commanding the 37th Tank Battalion that helped relieve Bastogne, captured this transformation. I never check fuel levels. I tell logistics where I'm going and assume gasoline will be there. It always is. Germans counted every liter while we counted victories. For Germany, the Ardennes taught a bitter lesson about modern war's requirements. Courage couldn't overcome chemistry. Will couldn't create petroleum. The Wehrmacht, that had conquered Europe with tactical innovation, was crushed by American industrial capacity. Former Luftwaffe General Adolf Galland summarized the defeat. We learned that modern war isn't won by warriors, but by factory workers. Not by heroes, but by petroleum geologists. The Americans didn't defeat our army. They drowned it in gasoline. The abandoned vehicles littering the Ardennes told the story. Mechanical perfection rendered useless by empty tanks. German engineering excellence meant nothing without fuel to power it. The King Tigers and Panthers masterpieces of armored warfare became 68-ton monuments to one simple fact. In modern war, the army with the most fuel wins. The fuel crisis of December 1944 cast a long shadow over military thinking. Future armies would learn from Germany's catastrophe. Never launch operations beyond your fuel supply. Never depend on capturing enemy resources. Never underestimate logistics. For America, the Ardennes validated their logistics-first approach. The ability to deliver millions of gallons anywhere, anytime, under any conditions became the foundation of American military supremacy. Every subsequent American military operation would prioritize fuel supply above all else. The German veterans who survived would carry the trauma of fuel starvation permanently. In post-war memoirs, the phrase "empty tank" appears more frequently than enemy fire. They were defeated not by American soldiers, but by American abundance. In the end, the Battle of the Bulge was decided in the oil fields of Texas and Oklahoma, not the forests of Belgium. The 2.2 million gallons at Spa that Piper couldn't reach was pocket change in American terms, replaced within 2 days. For Germany, it represented more fuel than entire army groups possessed. The battle proved that industrial capacity trumped military skill in modern warfare. American forces didn't need to be better soldiers when they could be better supplied. They didn't need superior tactics when they had superior logistics. They didn't need to count fuel when they had infinite amounts. As German tanks sat frozen and empty in the Ardennes snow, American vehicles rolled past in endless columns, engines running continuously, burning fuel with the casual indifference of unlimited supply. Each gallon burned was a statement of supremacy. each full tank a declaration of victory. The greatest tank battle on the Western Front ended not with climactic combat, but with the quiet death of engines running dry. The silence of empty fuel tanks spoke louder than artillery. German crews walked away from perfect machines they couldn't fuel, while Americans drove past in inferior tanks they could fuel forever. The Ardennes offensive failed because it challenged arithmetic with ideology, attempting to overcome infinite resources with finite courage. The 2.2 million gallons near Spa and 1.1 million at Stavelot represented not just fuel, but American industrial civilization's answer to German military prowess. Overwhelming abundance that made courage irrelevant and skill meaningless. In those frozen December days beside immobilized tigers and abandoned panthers, German soldiers learned the final lesson of industrial warfare. Modern war is won not by the army with the best soldiers, but by the nation with the most fuel. They had challenged an enemy who measured petroleum by the tanker ship, while they measured it by the jerry can. The outcome was predetermined by geology and geography, by oil wells and refineries, by pipelines and tanker ships. The Battle of the Bulge ended as it had to end, with German tanks sitting empty while American abundance flowed endlessly forward, carrying with it the inevitability of victory.